while back, 288 construction workers got together in Palmer, Alaska to build a house. They gathered on a Thursday morning and they waited for the sound of a gun. They were going to begin that construction with the sound of that gun, and they wanted to see how fast they could build a new 2-bedroom house. So they timed it. A crowd of about 6,000 spectators were gathered around to watch. It took 288 workers 3 hours, 53 minutes, and 59 seconds to build a house. And to top it all off, a furniture company furnished the house in less than 4 minutes. Total time just under 4 hours. And you thought it was hard. If you can get 288 workers together. But building a house is not the same thing as building a home. There's a lot of homes. You know, I see these commercials. Politicians in the papers talking about it this morning. All the dilapidated houses in Indianapolis, we're going to tear them down or refurbish them or sell them cheap or something. But it's not the houses that's the problem. The problem is the homes. The problem is the families. A lot of families, a lot of homes in our society are in trouble. And they need repairing and remodeling. 2/3 of the first marriages in this country end in divorce or separation. A lot of families are struggling financially with their children, with their in-laws, with infidelity, with alcohol, pornography, and the list just continues on and on. And so, you know, you might notice a couple of people who commented about it. This is Paul Getty, who has died a while ago. When he was alive, he was one of the richest men in the world. He made his first $1 million when he was 23 years old. And his fortune eventually totaled $4 billion, mostly in oil. He was married 5 times. And he once remarked, "I would give my entire fortune for a successful marriage." A strong family, a strong marriage is priceless. It was something he had never had. He'd had money, but he never had a good family. He tried several times, but he really never learned the secret. Billy Joel, and that's an old picture. He looks a lot worse nowadays. He's getting old. He was the artist of the year, had the record of the year, the song of the year, album of the year. He recorded 20 top 40 hits during the 80s, 9 of which reached the top 10. He's been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But personally, his life has not been very accomplished. He said the happiest times in my life were when my relationships were going well. In my whole life, I haven't met the person I can sustain a relationship with yet. So I'm discontented about that. I'm angry with myself. I have regrets. He's been married twice. He said, "You don't get hugged by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You don't have children with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I want what everybody else wants," he said, "to love and to be loved and to have a family." Families are important. So we want to think about What about strong families in the Bible? You might think about it. You know, as you look in the Bible, let's at least see if we can find a strong family. But it's hard to find. It's with a great deal of difficulty that you find a strong, healthy family in the Bible. Instead, what you find is a host of dysfunctional families. Just look at some of them. Adam, my goodness, his son murdered his brother. That's kind of dysfunctional on that category. Abraham, Hagar, and Ishmael were banished from the family. Lot, his children were involved in incest with him. Isaac, Jacob, and Esau are they deceive their father, and they maintain a grudge for over 20 years so that they ran away from one another, wouldn't see one another. And the Bible says the wives of Esau brought grief to his parents. Jacob has 12 sons by different wives. You do remember that. He had basically four wives, and 12 sons scattered around there, and they didn't get along well. They sell one of their brothers into slavery. That was almost an accomplishment. They wanted to kill him. Sort of a dysfunctional families. Eli, the Bible says of him, his sons were worthless men who did not know the Lord. David, one of his sons commits adultery with his sister. Another son rebels. He's guilty of adultery himself. That's sort of a dysfunctional family. Where's the role models? You know, one of the things we ought to appreciate about the Bible is it's sort of true to life. Doesn't cover up the imperfections. They're not there. There are exemplary families in the Bible, but hard to find. There are principles in the Bible that will guide us to help us locate them and see what they are. This was a research project by the University of Nebraska. The professor was a fellow by the name of Nick Stinnett, who was the chairman of their Department of Human Development. And it was a national study on strong families. And he posted this notice in about 50 newspapers in 25 states across the country. If you live in a strong family, please contact us. We know a lot about what makes families fail. We need to know more about what makes them succeed. What's going to make your family succeed? Boy, the letters began pouring in. Got about a questionnaire, once the letters came, were mailed out to about 3,000 families. And they went beyond America. He interviewed families in South America, Austria, Germany, Switzerland, and South Africa. To be included, families had to rate themselves high in marital happiness and in satisfaction with parent-child relationships. Their goal was to discover what makes a strong family. We're going to look at 6 things they found. And you'll find that they're qualities, all of them, that the Bible encourages. The first one is a simple one. It's commitment. Commitment. And what are you talking about? Commitment. Well, you know, when every one of you got married, you were told that what God has joined together, let not man separate. You committed to that? Are you busy threatening to leave one another or walk out, or scaring your kids to death, scaring your wife, scaring your husband, throwing your husband's clothes all out on the front lawn? You got to move out. I'm sick and tired of you. Are you committed to this? That was one of the first things they found. You know, I saw an ad in the paper. It said a Porsche for sale for $50. It was a Porsche 911 SC Targa, 2,300 miles, $50. Nice car. I can't get into it, but it looks like a nice car. When I was younger, I would have liked to have gotten into one of those. The actual value was about $60,000. So if you called in, you know, you thought, man, there's got to be a typo in this thing, but I'm going to call. Fella called the number, went to take a look. Lady met him at the door, pressed the garage door button, and lo and behold, there was the car, coal black, glistening in the garage. Had a new car smell coming from the interior. 2,304 miles on the odometer. Gorgeous. He said, how much? She said, like the paper said, $50. He laughed. He said, oh, no. How much are you really? How much are you asking? She wasn't laughing. She said, $50 and it's yours. But why? She took a deep breath and said, look, my husband ran off with his secretary. He sent me a telegram telling me that our marriage was over and instructed me to sell the Porsche and to send him the money. The price is $50. You know, that on one hand, that's kind of funny. But what one person in that marriage thought was commitment turned out to be only a temporary promise until somebody else got on the scene, prettier, younger, better. Have you ever had someone you loved and trusted make promises to you only to find out that they weren't going to be kept? It'll destroy a family, destroys a relationship. In 1 Corinthians 7, verse 27, are you bound to a wife? Seek not to be released. Commitment. A strong family, the first thing about it is that the two people are committed to one another for life. But you might notice another point. Strong families spend time together. Boy, we're all busy, aren't we? I told my wife coming down here, I said, whew, I'm just feeling overwhelmed right now, taking care of mom, and we got a host of sick folks in this church, and I feel guilty half the time that I'm not out seeing them every other day. Study and preaching. Winter's coming. I'm not ready. I may never be ready for winter in Indiana. Though Rita isn't. She's lived longer than I have, knows more about it. But a strong characteristic of these families was they spent time together. They worked together. They played together. They attended church together. They ate their meals together. It's a priority to strong families. Weak families spend time on other stuff. In a failing family, everybody's going a different direction. Christianity Today put out a survey saying that the average father spends only 3 minutes each day with his child and only 37 seconds with an infant child. 37 seconds. The fast pace of our life is taking a toll on our families. Spending time together has to be a priority. In order to keep a plant healthy, you've got to trim it back every now and then. Some of the good leaves, some of the branches, to make the other part of the family healthy. You may need to cut out some of the stuff you're doing. You may need to calm down just a little bit and say, my family comes first. Not all my fun, not trying to make $1 million. We'll live a little cheaper and we'll make my family work. You know, to have one night when everybody in the family can be together and do something together. Play a board game. Go bowling. Right? Go bowling. Play miniature golf. Make a cake. Take it to somebody who's a shut-in. And there's going to be a lot of cakes, by the way. We got a lot of shut-ins. Show old family movies. I don't even think we've got a bunch of them we haven't converted to any modern day format yet, which may be a good thing. I'd hate to see what we looked like back then. When 1,500 children are asked, what do you think makes a happy family? They didn't list money or cars or nice houses. They said doing things together. That's what makes a nice family. You know, as you think about it just a little bit, look in Genesis 2:24. A man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave to his wife. Now, that doesn't just mean be faithful to her. It means you need to spend some time with her. And they shall become one flesh. You need to spend time together as a family. You might think just a little bit further. The Lord warns you to be careful how you walk, making the most of your time. 3 minutes with an older child, 30 seconds with an infant is the average. That's kind of scary. The third thing they found is appreciation. Strong families showed appreciation for one another. You look gorgeous today. I'm glad I married you. You're the best friend I have. Maybe the only friend I have. Is that what you say? Because an awful lot of time, you'll find that strong families build one another up, and weak families tear one another down. They say things like, you're just like your mother. All you ever do is complain. I don't know why I put up with you. I've either heard or said one of those things. I don't know about you. Can't you do anything right? Strong families make one another feel good about themselves. In Ephesians 4:29, let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification, building one another up, according to the need of the moment, that it may give grace to those who hear. What kind of family you got? You know, the number one predictor of divorce is disrespect. Oh, grow up. You're such a baby. When you talk like that to one another, right away you better realize there's trouble here. Strong families show appreciation for one another. Failing families are very critical of one another. Fault-finding, belittling one another. An elder in the church was divorcing his wife. They'd been married for 46 years, He'd served as an elder for 2 different congregations. He knew it was wrong to divorce her, but was willing to sell his soul to get out. When asked why, he said, I just can't take her criticism any longer. Have you been very critical? You need to say things like, if I had it to do over again, I'd still marry you. I couldn't get you out of my mind today. I'll always love you. I'm so proud to be married to you. I'm sorry. I've got that written down, it's tattooed somewhere on me. I'm wrong. That's on the other arm. You make every day brighter. You need to be careful about criticizing your kids. One researcher said it takes about 16 positive compliments to offset 1 criticism. Negative criticism has a damaging effect on your children and their self-esteem. One of the people who wrote to this survey said every night we go into the children's bedrooms and give each of them a big hug and a kiss, and we say, you're really good kids, and we love you very much. And they said, we think it's important to leave them with that message at the end of each day. You might get the family together and spend just 1 minute praising somebody else in the family, telling them what's good about them. You ready to go on that, Jonathan? You don't have to right now, but maybe later you might pick somebody out in the family, maybe that brother you're always grumbling about, and say, hey, here's what I like about Ethan. Right, Ethan? 4th, strong families communicated. They talk to one another. Communication's an odd thing, you know. There was an ad, this is an old ad, there was an ad in the paper, in a small town newspaper, which is the worst kind. It was so funny. You know, Jeff Davis is a member of the church here. I'm going to tell you this story, and then I'm going to tell you the one I just introduced. Jeff Davis has a cell phone. And when was it? Last Sunday? Last Sunday, there was a big front page ad on the newspaper about, I don't know, something, cancer awareness. And there was a big ad down on the bottom of it that said that if you would call this number, you would be given, I don't know, what was it? A bracelet, a $5 cancer awareness bracelet. We got to looking at that, and lo and behold, that was Jeff's number. It was his cell phone number. He came in Monday and said, my phone has been ringing off the hook with all these women wanting the bracelet. I said, Jeff, it's the perfect opportunity to meet women. You might mention that you also sell firewood while you're at it, but he was glad that by Wednesday that had died down a little bit. It's in this newspaper, it said, for sale, R.D. Jones has one sewing machine for sale. Phone 958 after 7 p.m. and ask for Mrs. Kelly, who lives with him. Cheap. Small town. On Tuesday, the paper printed a correction. Notice, we regret having erred in R.D. Jones' ad yesterday. It should have read one sewing machine for sale cheap. Phone 958 and ask for Mrs. Kelly, who lives with him after 7 p.m. On Wednesday of that week, R.D. Jones has informed us that he has received several annoying telephone calls because of the error we made in his classified ad. His ad stands corrected as follows. For sale, R.D. Jones has one sewing machine for sale cheap. Phone 958 after 7 p.m. and ask for Mrs. Kelly, who loves with him. They're Thursday. Notice, I, R.D. Jones, have no sewing machine for sale. I smashed it. Don't call 958 as the telephone has been taken out. I have not been carrying on with Mrs. Kelly. Until yesterday, she was my housekeeper, but she quit. Communication is very important in our lives. Strong families communicate well, and they clear up any misunderstanding that somebody might say. A husband from New Mexico wrote, and by the way, I have this problem too, so I'm going to relate it to you. He said, my wife would say, are there any good movies downtown? Well, what she'd mean is, I'd like to go to a movie. But this husband would say things like, well, I'd give you a list of what's on. Here, this movie, this movie, this movie. But he says, rarely would I suggest going to a movie, and then I'd be surprised. She was going around all grumpy and pouty and wearing a long face. Eventually, he said, we'd figured this out. She's better now about saying, I'd like to go to a movie, rather than asking a question. And he says, I'm better about checking about what does she really mean when she says that. Mark Twain once said, the difference between the right word and the almost right word is the difference between lightning and a lightning bug. Communicate with one another. Explain what you're talking about. Figure it out. It's not that awful hard. Proverbs 25 and verse 11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. You need to learn to talk to one another and understand what's really going on. Strong families had spiritual faith. We've lived for 50 years with the schools and everybody trying to tell us that's really not necessary. But you can have a strong family without it. It's worked great, hasn't it? No. One fellow who wrote into the study said, our family has certain values, honesty, responsibility, and intolerance, to name a few. We have to practice those in everyday life. He said, I can't talk about honesty and cheat on my income tax return. I can't yell responsibility and turn my back on a neighbor who needs help. I'd know I was a hypocrite, and so would the kids and everyone else. There's been a lot of studies that show a direct correlation between church attendance and a happy, healthy life. People who go to church tend to lead a happier, healthier life and have a more satisfying marriage. A recent book on it called Marriage Savers says people who attend church even once a month increase their chances of staying married. Religion provides couples with a shared sense of values, ideology, and purpose in life. And Psalms 127 says, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Well, every family has problems. Strong families have them too. I think if you have those other 5 qualities, it makes the crisis easier to survive. Helps you get through it. Strong families have those other 5. And therefore, the crisis brings them closer together and, in fact, makes them stronger. Where those first 5 exist, the crisis hits, and there's nothing to hold them together. And the family oftentimes is shattered because of the crisis. Job said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. You lost your job. The house burned down. One of the children died. How do you deal with that? In Job 121, the Lord gave and the Lord is taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. It's survival. if you will implement the 6 qualities we talked about. The first was the idea of commitment. What God has joined together, let no man separate. Spend time together. How careful you walk, be careful how you walk, making the most of your time. Appreciation for one another. Let no unwholesome word proceed out of your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification according to the need of the moment, that it may give grace to those who hear. Ability to communicate with one another. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. Spiritual faith, unless the Lord builds the house, they will build it. And finally, the ability to cope with crisis. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Are you here this morning and not a Christian? You can start that building process now. Come while we stand and sing.